Who are we missing? Sydney and Sam.
Good morning, Mustangs. This is Kate Ramsey and Noah Wood on the track. And it is time for your morning announcement. Students, listen up. Enjoy a night under the stars of Greece. Walk through the town of Santorini and bask in the glory of the Colosseum as you experience this year's homecoming. Midnight in the Mediterranean. Tickets for homecoming will be going on sale tomorrow, Tuesday, September 28th, and will be $25 for a couple ticket and $15 for a single ticket. You can purchase tickets in the main office.
Mustangs, the GSA will be meeting after school at 2:35 in room 2302 on Tuesday. We will be making pins and discussing GSA's involvement with homecoming.
ASL Club's opening social will be this Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. in Mrs. Bowman's room. We will be learning fall signs, playing games, and enjoying an after-school snack. Please make sure to have your permission slip signed and club fees paid in the main office. We look forward to seeing you there.
Teachers and students, we just received word on Friday that all Chromebook technology district-wide is going to be on a new Wi-Fi certification and will require all Chromebooks to be turned off and then turned back on and just leave it, and it will automatically connect to the new certification or certificate. It will require about 15 minutes. So we only have 2 days to do this, after which it will not be able to connect, and it will have to go through, every Chromebook will have to go through Mike Smith. So please, today, if not tomorrow, please make sure that you have turned your Chromebook on and just let it sit, and it will connect automatically to the new certificate. Oh, you can do that now if you want to.
Now for the pledge. Please stand and repeat the pledge after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, what kind of day is it?
It's a great day to be a Mustang.
Okay, you made it.
Yeah.
All right, so you're gonna find your packets this poem called "I Carry Your Heart with Me" by P.E. Cummings. It is. He spells his name in all lowercase. It's not a typo. And when you see the poem, nothing in that poem is a typo. It's how he intended it to be. So, oh, I've got extras. Do I have extras? I have extras of the poetry. Oh, I do. Let's make sure it's a current one. Yeah. All right, so you're finding that poem, and then with the partners, we're finding enjambment, caesura, and subline, accident, consonant, and alliteration. A little bit of a review for all these terms. each other out, work with a partner to find these different poetry things. Oh, yeah. Yeah, nothing in there is a typo. It's how you wanted it to look. Did you find all those 6 things? Raise your hand if you found all 6. Okay, so I want you to work together then and point out where they are to each other so that you can move a little bit faster to find them. So I should be hearing people talking to each other. I know it's Monday. You don't want to look at another person. Okay, here's what I want you to do next. I want you to choose which 2 of those qualities, which 2 of those vocabulary words seem to be the most important for this particular poem in conveying a certain meaning. So this is where you would go, like you're reading through the poem really quickly on the test, right? One of those timed essays that you did. You read through it really quickly and you're trying to find these things. I want you now to see
which one you would want to write about when it comes, or two of them that you would want to write about if you had to write this essay, which you don't, but hypothetically, and discuss why those would be the two. Hey, all right, how did it go doing the timed poetry essay? Yeah, it's this class has a really similar structure because it's those 3 essays again and then multiple choice. So you'll get those AP like flashbacks. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Good question. We're going to keep practicing like the structure of it because there is no set length. You should try to fill up the time limit. So it's kind of a tricky thing to do with those timed essays. You want to have structure to it and you want to set up your thesis so that it has structure and you're following the structure of your thesis. Very similar to if you had me last year for Lang or 10th, very similar to how we talked about it in that class, breaking up your thesis statement into its logical parts, right? But you also have to know what you're capable of in 40 minutes because you don't want to stop writing when you have 10 minutes left. You want to be able to like say as much as you possibly can about the poem or the short passage or whatever. So it's this tricky thing that you kind of learn about yourself. It's why we do a whole bunch of those timed writing essays. Spoiler alert, there will be so many more of them. You'll grow to love them so much. But it's so that you can like figure out just how much you can write and you can structure your essay sort of knowing that, oh, I'm going to be able to hit all of these points because I know myself as a writer. Makes sense. Like, so that'll be something that you sort of get used to as you're doing a whole bunch of them. And we will be practicing how to structure it and all of that. So there's no set number of paragraphs. It's just as many paragraphs as it needs to be is how many you're going to talk about, you know? So today we're going to be talking about this poem called Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. I, of course, like to have 5 of these packets. Oh, good.
Page 30.
Page 30, that means so much.
It is a long poem.
It's a really long poem. We're going to talk about a long poem today.
What's that?
And
Latin?
it is Italian. Yes. All right. And before we get into it, I want to tell you about the time period for this one. So, oh brother, I didn't look up the date it was written. 1 second. Make sure. Let me make sure I got this right. Okay, good. All right, so it's written in 1915 by this guy, T.S. Eliot, L1T. who was part of a movement called the Modernist movement. So it would be a good idea to take some notes on modernism, maybe just to the side of the poem, honestly. There isn't going to be a whole lot. But a lot of the stuff that we read in here, and a lot of the, maybe not a lot of the stuff that we read, but a few things that we read in here are going to be modernist. And a lot of the things that the AP test sometimes uses are modernist. I think it's because it's a great movement for really unpacking what seems like absurd language at first. So the history of modernism. Number one, you've got industrialization happening. So, you know, up through the 1800s, there's this mass movement of industrialization. And because of industrialization, you've got urbanization, meaning more and more people are moving to cities, and cities are getting more and more crowded and filthy. There's huge pollution problems. There's housing problems. There's garbage and sanitation problems. Like, as there's like this giant influx of people to cities, cities are getting grosser and grosser. So that's kind of like the setting that people are living in. At the same time, you've got World War I starting, and World War I is the kind of our first like modern war with airplanes and tanks and all of these like new machines kind of going to war for people. And you have the scientific leaps being made at the time with Charles Darwin and Einstein. All right, combine all of these way new things together into a movement, and you've got a group of artists and a group of just people in general, thinkers, but mostly artists, who are thinking that art needs to change in order to respond to this moment. Like, it doesn't feel like things felt during the Victorian era anymore. We're not just concerned about, you know, man meets woman and like where heroes come from and all of that. We need some sort of art movement to respond to all of these different things that are happening in the world, and all of these kind of like confusions that are happening. So the modernists thought about theory of relativity and adaptation and evolution with the scientific theory. They thought about what it felt like to go to war in World War I, and they thought about what it felt like to live in cities during a time of industrialization and mass expansion. And they decided that art should no longer be linear. It should no longer have a very clear beginning, middle, and end, because it doesn't feel like life anymore. It has a very clear beginning, middle, and end. It sort of feels like life is this chaotic, anarchic like feeling. It just, you wake up one day and maybe it's an entire different landscape, right? Maybe some new scientist has come up and said, oh, we now are descended from apes, and you have to deal with that new sort of reality, right? So they want to reject that idea of linearity because they didn't feel like it was a sort of system of linear thinking anymore.
Like abstract art comes from?
Yes, abstract art usually starts to kind of become way more prevalent during this time period. Like, this is when the Impressionists are working. So they're building off like Monet, Van Gogh, those types, and then they're building off that to become even more abstract. So yes, yeah, and most abstract art we would call, from this era at least, is modernism. I'm stumbling because then from this, postmodernism comes out, and a lot of abstract art qualifies as postmodernism more. So, but it's the start of it. Yeah, exactly. So they reject linearity. They reject realism. They don't want things to depict life the way that it actually looks. They want to make some comment on life through their art. And so I think that's a really good question that Kale asked, because right before this is like portraiture is a really popular form of art, or still lifes that you can actually tell what's being depicted, right? And from modernism comes people like Picasso, who are going to sort of shake things up and look at it from a different angle. So they're rejecting this idea of realism, and they are rejecting, this should sound familiar because of Crime and Punishment. They're rejecting what are called meta-narratives. You know, we might call the existentialist a modernist movement, because they're rejecting the idea of this overarching story that can explain everything. So along with rejecting linearity, that we have a beginning and a middle and an end, and that there is a cause that leads to an effect, and we can always predict what's going to happen, they're rejecting this idea that there's any sort of story that can describe why we are living the life that we are living.
Why do people always like attempt to deny God?
I don't know.
It's
Maybe it's just the stuff that I teach in class.
not hating, but it's just kind of like weird. Like eventually there are always movements that come to the realization that it's just humanity.
Well, I think a huge part of it for these guys is this. Like those two things combined together, the kind of like Agent Orange, like horribleness. There's it not Agent Orange. Is it during World War I? No, that's Vietnam. Mustard gas during World War I, right? Yeah.
The chemical one.
Anyway, so it's like chemical warfare happening in World War I, and the kind of machines and the mass death that's happening in World War I, combined with this idea that we can find other ways to think about the world rather than through religion, I think
So it's
leads
like
them to
the
want to.
idea that everything kind of has an explanation now of why it does the thing.
Yeah, and the explanation is not linear. It's not like you're going to be the hero of your own story, but there's an explanation. I think that's part of it. Yeah. Okay, so then over here, they loved in their art disruptions. They loved a kind of like self-awareness to the disruption. And a lot of times those disruptions were references to other things. So it was like they were using collage, using all these different references combined together to create their art to disrupt anything that seemed to be like romantic or seemed to be like too traditional. So you'll see like the story starting to develop in modernist art, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I can follow this plot, awesome. And then suddenly there will be some random reference that comes from something else, and you're just like, I don't know what this means. And it's because they always wanted the reader to be aware that what they were reading was art. Like they didn't want the reader or the viewer or whatever to be confused and think, oh, this is a representation of reality, because they wanted to like emphasize the artiness of it, the created quality of it. Does that make sense? Okay. And they also loved then discontinuity. You know, have the middle part of the story first, and then move back to the beginning, and then move to the end, and then back to the middle. It's all kind of non-linear and all over the place. They felt like this was representative of like how our brains actually thought. They also hated consumerism and mass culture. So they weren't that concerned with selling a lot of copies of things. They were like kind of the rebels. They're the punks of their time period.
Oh, well, I guess that makes sense, because the idea that it's your art that you're and your own expression of the world.
Yes.
You would want other people to have it.
Yes, exactly. Now the difference here, so there is something called postmodernism that comes out of modernism, and we're like in this like post-modernism phase where everything's a joke now, and it's it's gotten so far away from this. But modernism, there is a message in it. Like they didn't necessarily reject all meaning. And in fact, they thought art was so important that art could kind of replace the idea of a meta narrative, that art could replace the idea of God as a way of explaining the world. So for modernists, like you can pick it apart and you can find intention that the artist had, and you can figure out what they were trying to say. From this movement comes postmodernism, and postmodernism is like, there is no meaning, good luck, you know? But modernist is like, there is a message, there are important things that we need to share as a culture, and my art can get us there. It's just not gonna get us there through a depiction of reality. And I think that's it for their tenets. So things like jazz is a modernist movement.
Well, no wonder, I don't like jazz.
I mean,
It's kinda like-
Virginia Woolf is a modernist author, if you've ever read Virginia Woolf. Picasso is a modernist artist. Picasso. T.S. Eliot is a modernist poet. So it's anything that's like, yeah, kind of disjointed, disconnected. Jazz, exactly.
It
Jazz
makes-
isn't necessarily concerned with that like melody, you know?
It makes sense now though, hearing about the modernism movement. And
It's a jazz movement,
it was, yeah.
totally.
The lack of linearity and sort of like the rhythm.
Yes, and I think jazz gets so much of its inspiration from this particular reality of what the world was like in 1915, around that time period. So modernism starts to become a thing like 1890. It's starting to emerge, and it becomes like in its full force in the 1920s, in 19-teens, 1920s. And then we kind of lasts until like the 1950s, and then we start getting into postmodernism. It's not that those timelines are perfect. There's still people that are making art that is based on like modernist ideas, but that's kind of like our timeline, how it goes. So with that in mind, let's read this poem. That should probably give you a little bit of a hint about how coherent or understandable this poem is going to be, but we're going to figure it out. There is a kind of plot here. Like I said, there is meaning in the poem. It's not rejecting that completely. I'm going to read it to you. It's a long one. And you are going to, annotate what you think stands out to you as we go. So the first part I can't read. It's Italian, and I don't read Italian, but it is a quotation. No, I'm not even going to try. Do you want to try?
Yeah, I'll try. Kind of like.
Do one line. Let's hear it.
Se io credesse che mia risposta fosse.
I think that's good, except for you got to do this a
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
There we go. Gabagool. What?
Once my best friend's Italian, I can have her on FaceTime reading it to the
Oh, beautiful. For now, though, let's skip it. Okay, so it's a quote from Dante's Inferno, which is like a very long poem, and it's written in a specific style where you can see how much rhymes there. It's first and third line rhymes, and then second, fourth, and sixth, whatever. It's got a specific triplet rhyming scheme. And this is a part in, so Dante's Inferno, if you're not familiar with this, it is the poet Dante is being led by an ancient Roman hero, Virgil, down into the depths of hell, and he's going through the different circles of hell, and there's 9 circles of hell. And in each circle of hell, like as he gets deeper and deeper into hell, he encounters more and more, he encounters a specific kind of punishment. So it'll be like, oh, these people, these are the liars, they will forever be burning. I don't know if that's exactly what liars are, but it's like each circle of hell, different kinds of sinners belong, and they're all experiencing punishment in a very specific way. And it's like really awful and a pretty awesome poem to read. He also, Dante, was kicked out of Italy for various reasons. And so he has a real beef to pick with the people who were there. And so in each circle of hell, he's like encountering people that he actually knew in life and saying, and this is where this guy would belong in hell, and this will be his punishment. So he finds in the 8th circle to hell, so this is like the second to last, the second worst sin that you can possibly have. And this is what it translates to. If I thought that my reply would be to someone who would ever return to earth, this flame would remain without further movement. But as no one has ever returned alive from, where'd it go? Okay, that's basically, since no one has ever returned alive from hell, I'm not afraid of telling you my story because you're never going to be able to tell other people. And then ironically, or maybe not ironically, you should have known, Dante gets out of hell and does tell the story to everyone else. So here is this guy. His name is Guido, who is in this 8th circle. And the 8th circle is where people who have committed fraud and deliberate knowing evil exist. So it's not like they just lied for their own benefit. It's like they defrauded like an entire sort of government. They're big. And this guy is in that circle because he was a fraudulent advisor to a king, I think, an evil counselor. And he's saying like, and he also wanted other people to support that fraud. So in that quotation, Dante is saying like, hey, Guido, why are you in hell? And Guido says, I am a little bit afraid of, tarnishing my reputation, but I will tell you because no one is ever going to get out of hell. So that's sort of the like precursor to this poem. Here we go. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread across the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels, and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent, to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask what is it. Let us go and make our visit. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once upon about the house and fell asleep. And indeed, there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair. With a bald spot in the middle of my hair, they will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest but asserted by a simple pin, they will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a moment, there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a further room. So how should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. When I am formulated, sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the buttons of my days and ways? And how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight drowned with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap around about a shawl? And should I then presume? And how should I begin? Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. And the afternoon, the evening speaks so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I've seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. And would it have been worth it after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, or say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you, I shall tell you all. If one, settling a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all. Would it have been worthwhile after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets and the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts and that trail along the floor, and this and so much more? It is impossible to say just what I mean, as if a magic lantern threw the nerves and patterns on a screen. Would it have been worthwhile if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window, should say, that is not it at all, that is not what I meant at all? No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am an attendant lord, one that will do to swell to progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt, an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtruse, at times indeed almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool. I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think they will sing to me. I've seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back. When the wind blows the water white and black, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. Clear as crystal, right? You get it. Okay, good. Here's what I want us to do. So I want us in groups of 4. So you 4, and then you 2 and you 2 pair up together, Race and Sydney with these 2, and then you 4 over here. Okay, so what I want us to do is go through each stanza. Actually, let's do this together first. So we've kind of gone through what the Italian description is all about. Guido saying, I won't worry about you telling my story because you'll never get out of hell. And then the first few stanzas of this are all kind of setting creating a setting. So we've got, let us go then, this famous, very famous first line. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. I think in this first part, we get our main characters and we get the setting, a little bit of the setting. So let us go then, you and I. We start the poem off with a bit of a romantic feeling, like, you know, someone holding out their hand to say, like, let us go, you and I, let's go walk through this setting together. A way of saying, like, there's 2 characters, me and you, and I want to lead you somewhere. And it says, when the evening is spread out against the sky, and that first bit is very romantic sounding. To say the evening is spread against the sky, don't you like hear like this like cool blue with maybe like some purples and like a little dotting of stars? Like that's a beautiful way to say it's spread out against the sky, like it's almost like a bedspread against the sky, you know? But then it says like a patient etherized upon a table. All right, so how does that immediately switch the tone of the poem? Sammy?
Goes from like this like really kind of sweet scene to like gory in a hospital.
Yes, okay, so you said gory?
Kind of.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit gory. I think the spread out part creates the gore, almost like this person is being like cut open, you know? The etherized part, the person is like, has like ether, so they're unconscious, right? How does that change the feel of the poem? Yeah, Kale.
Kind of like I kind of imagine like this romantic table setting and then a patient like lying on top of your table while you're trying to sleep.
Okay, so it's like distracting in that way
Yeah,
and kind of
it's-
disgusting.
It's very setting, and it's sort of like the similar to like modern, which there were these random tidbits that are, why would you say that?
Yes, okay, good. So it's this disruption of a scene that we were already familiar with. It's this way of disrupting tradition for sure. A patient etherized upon a table too, like that person doesn't have much will anymore. They're etherized and they're sort of like open to somebody doing whatever they want to do to that person. So from the very beginning of the poem, we get this idea of like inactivity and like somebody doing something against their will, or at least like letting someone else make decisions for you. And they say, let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. What is he saying by one-night cheap hotels? What are those? Yeah, one-night cheap hotels would be kind of like brothels, where you pay by the hour type of a place. And it says as sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, which means that it's like sawdust on the floor so that you can just like spit on your tobacco juice or whatever on the floor. You can just scatter the oyster shells on the floor. It's not a fancy place, this restaurant that he wants to take her to. So it's like, let's go through this city that's full of like prostitutes and gross restaurants. Also, oysters are an aphrodisiac. So right from the very beginning, he's also bringing up this like seediness of love. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. What does the word insidious mean?
With ill intent.
Yes, okay, good. So insidious is like much stronger than ill though. Like it's with ill intent, but it's like evil, right?
Yeah.
And so the way that the streets are laid out in this city is evil, and like they are meant to guide you to somewhere evil, to lead you to an overwhelming question, ... Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. So we know right here that our main character has some sort of question that he's wanting to ask. Let us go, you and I want to take you somewhere and I want to ask you this question. And then he says, oh, don't ask what it is. We'll get to that. And then we've got this couplet, in the room, women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. I don't know. And then it says, the yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corner of the evenings, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot falls from chimneys. Why do you think, okay, so he's talking about fog here. Why yellow? Yeah, Christiane. Yeah, it is. Okay, so it's like kind of a direct reference then to like something that is poisonous and to the warfare, right? Why else use yellow to describe the fog in a city? So I think it's mustard gas, yes. Audrey? And it's polluted and disgusting. So it's like poisonous to taste or poisonous to breathe, right? And I feel like it's got like a kind of taste to it, and it says it licked its tongue into the corners of the evening to kind of like get at that idea that it smells bad, that it tastes bad, like all of your senses are sort of assaulted by it. But it describes it as this kitty that's sort of like rubbing its back against this, right? So it's kind of like it's got a character to it, it's personification, and it's not necessarily like terrible. It's almost like a comforting thing. And it's curled about the house and fell asleep, and there's yellow smoke and yada, yada, yada. And then it says, there will be time. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions before taking of a toast and tea. And he continues to talk about that throughout the poem. He's like, I want to ask you a question. Hang on. I don't want to ask it yet. Let's just keep going. There's going to be time. There's going to be so much time. Don't worry. We're going to have time for everything we want to do, including murdering and creating. There's endless opportunities here. Yeah, Sammy? Yeah, it does. I think that's true. Without ever having any sort of instance of sexual assault at all, right? There's something in it that feels like he is assaulting us and making us think about things we maybe don't want to think about in the imageries that he uses. Yes?
It's like throughout the poem, he's constantly like guilting in kind of way. He talks about old age and how he's getting older and
Yes.
how all these people, all these women are talking about Michelangelo, which I think is a reference to the statue of David, which is like the ideal.
Ah,
body type.
okay.
That's kind of the vibe
Yeah,
got,
I
and
can see
how
that.
He's like talking about his own body and how he's like, it just kind of gets the feeling that he's trying to guilt.
Yes, yes. So when Sammy says it feels rapey, it's like not quite that, right? He's more like pathetic, and it feels more gaslighty to me,
Yeah.
where he's trying to like get you to feel guilty about him. Yes, okay, so here's what I'm gonna have you do. In those groups of 4 that I told you about, I want you to go stanza by stanza, and we got to go kind of quickly because eventually I'm going to have you draw in pictures. But I want you to go stanza by stanza and just quickly figure out, what does this add to the plot? So you're not necessarily digging into the word choices the way that we do when we're talking about like Emily Dickinson and I make us talk for 20 minutes about willing away our possessions, right? You're not doing that. You're going through stanza by stanza to try and find what the story actually is here. All right, so with those 4, you'll have to move so that you're with the 4, stanza by stanza, and make a little note next to it, what is happening in the plot as you go. Yes, you start with the couplet and then move from there.
In the room, the woman come and go, talk to the company. And indeed there will be the one who, do I dare? Do I dare? Time to turn back and decide to stare with the ball spot and the yeah. They say It will say how it's shared and it's going to share. My morning coach, my calling now to confirm shit. My next time it's modest, but stereotypes. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. To my dear, in a minute there's precision and position switch of those words. It's like that with it's like right there, right there.
You can also contrast like the theme aging and how there's only like with the previous things, like it's like I think the kindergarten now.
True. Oh,
Hearing the music of this is Cowboy to Death.
really?
Like the music of this is like the song of like familiarity and like out.
That's the subtle rep.
The part of the room is like,
I think.
Okay, and you write beside what each stanza means, right? Just real quickly, a little note.
And I have felt that the eyes already, eyes fixed me and empty place. And when I wonder strong, really fall, then how shall I begin? Spit out all the buttons.
this one's pretty. So, come all the time in the world. Stops. And this means it'll.
that cultural.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. How can you know?
Yeah. I think it's more symbolic on.
Also, I like how you point out. Yes. So I can. All cats.
Yeah.
Light brown hair.
Shall I say?
Shall I say, I've gone up to scope down, right, for years to go. I heard something that it should not be.
I don't know. Oh, I'm so like.
Yeah, maybe the evening sleep.
The golden hour. And it is, picture I see.
You're like different. Shut down.
I know buffet.
I'm sure you know, I'm sure you
It's
like
like
most
most
of
of
the
the
games,
games,
like, yeah, when it goes on the time.
I like to always make it in short. I would-
Just in paradise, starting process was, lots of good graphics. So he wants to do crap, crap's the idea.
Everything revolves back.
Possibly that they're thinking about that when they wrote this because. So that might be its actual meaning. He wants to do
Maybe not.
because that'd be you.
Eventually, you become crap. But from that, it's wrong. Why, you guys don't want to.
At least make something.
Stolen. I'm gonna be looking back. Just clearly.
Maybe it's like he wants for family, cancer is a trap, and that's like the symbol of. Like, symbol of like eternal love. Also. I think it's just crap. What do you think?
I think right. Because I'm distracted.
But why would you say that?
It wasn't very cross. I think it might be.
What about scum? Is that-
Lobsters don't smell. Crabs don't. Takes it from like symbol for wealth to or progress. Lobster is wealth. Crabs. family.
Or he just wants to be a crab on the bottom of the ocean, scuttling around, away from all of these questions.
Should I actually? It's showing towards the moment, right? So I want to see my head doing all wrong in one of that. I'm I like to sneak along. Like dark inside. Long, like the long thing, it's like they're trying to-
Fall asleep. That's it. So it's kind of so bad.
I didn't know it. Had an idea with this conversation.
Like fingers pulling.
I just imagine fixing it. I've actually heard your body jerking you away. People look at your heart beat slow down, you know, it's like, right. Classic. Okay. But it could be a pianist playing the melody. Keep going. It all comes back to track. Okay.
Yeah, the eternal question is like,
He's guilty here again. Just like I affected last to left and he was like, yeah, I keep thinking it's a dog. I think it's a dog. Dog trickery. Snakes are cute. Snakes are really- Those snakes are dogs. Oh, bigger big sponsors.
Okay, I want to give you 5 more minutes for this. So how many, you guys are nearing finished, right?
Yeah.
And you guys have 1 page left over here, basically? Okay, that sounds good. So get to the end of that, figure out what he's talking about with these mermaids, and then we'll talk about it as a class. No, don't skip to the mermaids, but just go
Okay.
faster through this.
Even if the company very well. Yeah. I grew
What would happen? Nowhere. Like, right, this house is talking about starting to say, this one goes up.
I think it's like it adds great. Then it's right here.
I think it's.
Initial siren voice. Or is it like for the speakers and say like as for yeah, it's
Pop in that pump.
okay. Good. Yeah.
Oh, that's not a. Drag that home. Imagine how he's like, it like going into like comments. So.
Okay, let's talk about this together now. So this poem is called, I should have emphasized this more, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. So he, yeah, he is, this is his serenade to his lady love, right? Trying to take her somewhere and ask her some sort of question. Tell me what the plot is now of this poem. Like, first, let's start with him. Who is Prufrock? Like, as a character, how would you describe this guy? Sammy? Okay, crabby, like literally crabby, because he does say he would like to be a crab. Okay, so he's literally crabby and also metaphorically crabby in that he seems to be like easily annoyed. And then he's kind of creepy. Tell me more about his creepiness. But yeah, Christiane.
He's manipulative and it looks like gaslights a lot of different people.
Okay, tell me about that. In what way is he manipulative?
He talks about how he's not the main character. On that book, not the Hamlet. He
Yeah.
talks about how he's like left fast and left afraid as like a show of how he's religious.
Yes.
Just stuff like that.
Okay, good. So it's like he wants to, it seems like he wants our pity a little bit, or the you of the poem. He wants her pity by saying like, I'm not the main character, like I'm merely the advisor. I'm the one who's behind the scenes, and sometimes I'm even the fool, you know, and the mermaids, they're not gonna sing to me. So there's this kind of like, oh, woe is me, but also like I'm prayerful and repentant, like maybe I should get more attention than other people give me, you know, like I'm worth it. Yeah, Kale?
I also have to agree with this kind of, there's, in the beginning, he talks all the time how to do anything, like he can murder someone, to walk, and then later he's talking about how little time there is. I wouldn't say he's like an old man, I'd say he's more middle-aged,
Uh-huh.
and then he's getting on, he's using that fact to be like, well, I'm an older guy, I want to do stuff, I like this strictly almost routine,
Uh-huh.
and I just kind of.
Okay, good. So it's sort of like as far as a love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, he's like using the fact that his time is running out, like the fact that he is middle-aged, to sort of convince her to take pity on him and do stuff with him, as you said. Yes, so there is. What makes you think that this is a poem about that? Just to be, we're in AP Lit, so we have to talk about that. What makes you think it is a song about like not just expressing his romantic feelings for her, but like trying to get her into bed? Yeah.
Oh, well, there was this one point where he describes like kind of the ladies he's been with.
Yes.
And he only kind of refers to them as one, which, you know, provides some interesting things.
Okay, good.
Also like how he took her to a brothel, he took her to a cheap restaurant, he doesn't care all that much about her, except for her looks most likely. He doesn't even like talk about her at all. Like he doesn't reference the fact that he loves the color of her hair.
Mhm.
He loves her personality. He's really only talking about himself.
Yeah, good. Good. So there seems to be something very surface level about his thoughts for her, and it's more about what he wants to do. Yeah, Sammy.
Fine if one setting you filling up pillow or
Mhm.
drawing off her shawl. Like he's trying to like push you, but like it's not that big of a deal. Just
Yeah.
take it off.
Yeah, good. Yes,
Exactly.
and in that moment too, I think it's really interesting that he also goes back to his insecurities right there. He says, would it have been worthwhile if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window should say, this is not it at all. This is not what I meant at all. I think that part's really important. Christiane?
There's a part where he doesn't outright say rape, but it says that I intend to break it on the wall.
Yeah, he's talking, it kind of takes us back to that eat the rice upon the table image too. It's like a kind of like helplessness and a kind of like display that he's
Does
interested in a very creepy way.
Question.
Yeah.
Does he want her to be the one helping us? Or does he self.
Or does he feel himself to be helpless?
Or
Like, is he I think that's how he's posing it. Like, I am this helpless, pitiful old man, going up in years. So like, pity me and maybe ask the question for me so that I don't have to do it. He's kind of like, he's kind of manipulating her through his patheticness to act so that he doesn't have to, I
to
think.
make her think that maybe, oh, well, he's just.
Maybe that's part of it. He wants to seem like non-threatening, right? But that moment where it says, this is not what I meant, this is not what I meant at all. See how that's in quotation marks? So he's not talking about himself saying that, he's talking about the woman saying that she, like, maybe after they have done what they are going to do, would turn toward the window and say, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. So there's this way that he talks about rejection and potential rejection in here. And he's sort of like, I don't want to ask the question that I want to ask, because what if you say, oh, that's not what I meant? Like, you're giving off all these signals, but like, what if we, if I ask this question, if I take this leap, maybe the question is, will you be my girlfriend? Who knows what that question is? It's something important though about their relationship. If I ask that question and she turns to the wall and says, that's not what I meant at all. Like, I do not have those kinds of feelings for you. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how crushed will I be? So then I'm not going to ask the question. Yes, and he keeps bringing up how big of a question this is going to be. Like, how could I possibly presume? My question is going to change the universe. It is going to change everything about this world. So I'm afraid, and I'm not going to ask this question. So there's this like procrastination element to this poem too, that he's constantly like approaching some sort of big, sort of life-changing event according to him. But then he's like, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. There will be time. I'll get to that. There will be time. Yeah, Kale?
He's exaggerating.
Yes.
He wants her, I guess, he wants her to feel like, oh, well, this is a big, important thing in his life. I would feel that. I don't want to crush this poor sad
Yes.
who describes himself as a clown.
Yes, exactly. And I love that line. Like, I do not think they will sing for me, the mermaids. Like, I don't think that anyone's gonna sing for me. Like,
They
right?
wouldn't want to
Right,
let me down
lady?
to the
Like,
ground.
yeah, yes, exactly. People still don't understand what the mermaid stuff is about. I don't have a definitive reading of the mermaid stuff. I have seen them writing seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. So tell me what your reading is of that. Like, what is that all about, the mermaids at the end? Kel?
It could be a reference to silence and like the fact that there was the singing part. and,
Mhm.
like, how he was like golden by them,
Yeah.
and I guess maybe was golden by her, referencing her as a mermaid. and
Yeah.
It's kind of her fault that she,
He's in this state, I think.
and that he's in this helpless state of like, I love you. and I really-
Yes. Yes, good. I think it's super interesting though that they're singing each to each. So the mermaid's not singing to him, and he's like, they're never gonna sing to me. They're singing each to each. So it's like they're leaving him out. Kind of the way that the women are talking of Michelangelo, talking of art, or talking of the David. I really like that reading. Having this like highfalutin conversation, and leaving him out of that. They're just coming and going and not paying attention to him at all. So it could be that the mermaids here are like not paying attention to him at all, and he's just watching them, sort of like in, the way that you kind of people watch people being in love, and he's completely left out of that. Is there any other reading of the mermaids that you guys had? Yeah, Jacob?
We kind of saw it as like almost like a dream, like this whole poem was like a dream that's like him finally waking up.
Yeah.
Realizing he's still like where he was.
Till human voices wake us and we drown. So it's like this dream, and I don't even know if it has to be a real dream, but this sort of like dream of actually following through with something, a plan even. But then he's kind of like thrown back into life by the humanity of humans and saying, no, I'm just exactly where I was. I'm not progressing at all. Yeah, Audrey?
I think it's like an Idron, like for me, it's like this dreaming of this lady love, and she doesn't really exist. It's like I wake up and we drown. It's like I'm drowning because she's gone because I.
Okay, I like that. So it kind of, by waking up, you kind of kill off the potential of love even. Yeah, Christian.
We understood it as kind of like how sirens will lure them,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes people like so creepy person, but like people from late and sirens lure.
Excellent. Okay. Could it be also that this is kind of death that he would long for from the sirens? That he could be drowned by the sirens, and this could be like a great way of dying finally, of making your life sort of worth it. Okay, I bring that up because really scholars keep talking about the mermaids and they're not quite sure what to make of the mermaids, and there's all sorts of readings of the mermaids at the end of this poem. The rest of it, like people are kind of agreed upon, but then you get to the end and they're like, I don't know what the mermaids are. But the point here is that maybe not everything in the poem does fit together exactly. Maybe you can't make logical sense of every single image in the poem, but it was what T.S. Eliot called an objective correlative, which really was just a word that T.S. Eliot used, a phrase that he used to describe his own poems. But basically it was a combination of images, combination of symbolic images to create an emotion. So he called it like imagistic algebra. That's what he wanted to call it. And he was very close to the imagists. Remember of course you remember the plums poem. Who could forget the best poem of all about plums? How he was an imagist and he was like, a plum is just a plum. T.S. Eliot's kind of saying that too. He's like, fog is just fog. But when I can describe it this way, as yellow fog like a cat, and then I combine that with this image of mermaids drowning us at the end, I can add those together. Fog plus mermaid equals this sort of emotional response. And so he wasn't necessarily concerned with creating that linear story. We kind of find it in the poem because of how our emotions are reacting to it, but he's not really all about the plot. He was a modernist, and he was more about how you can create this discontinuity through collage of images, and then collage of references. There's the reference to Hamlet, you see that. There's the reference to Michelangelo. You'll just have to take my word for it that there are references to things, other poems throughout this poem. When he talks about time, there will be time, that's a reference specifically to a poem called To His Coy Mistress. When he has the reference to Dante and the Inferno at the beginning, he's got references to this Greek poem about life and death, and they're like, he's got them all over the place, and he's combining them all together. When you do this with a collage, you're combining them all together to create this kind of emotional impact. And he wanted to do that, like he wanted it to hit you with that emotion even when you don't know exactly what's happening. And remember, right as soon as we were done reading this poem, it immediately was like, it feels like rapey, I think is the word that Sammy used, right? It feels creepy. There's something about this poem that's unsettling even before we understand what's actually happening in it. So what we're going to do is create images from Proofrock. We've only got 10 minutes to start on this. That's fine. We're going to create images from Proofrock. So you're going to choose one of the bits of algebra that he comes up with in this. So you're going to choose the cat and the fog, or you're going to choose the teaspoons and counting days with coffee spoons, or you're going to choose the mermaid, or choose the crab, whatever image you think is a central image for the poem. And it could be any of these. And you're going to create an image of it. So this is for King Lear, so don't pay attention to what it's actually an image of, but you'll create some kind of image to represent the one that's in the poem. And you're going to try and do that. You're going to try and capture the emotion that he has in this poem in your image. And I know that we're not all artists, but you can use colors and squiggly lines, and it can be as abstract as you want it to be. I chose two that are very artistic. I should have chosen one that was just a stick figure. But then once you've got your image down, represented the way that he wanted it to be, you are going to find 5 instances from that image, 5 ways that he uses to describe that image, or 5 quotes from the poem that you think support the way that you've drawn your image, and you're going to label the different parts of the image with those 5 quotes. So you're finding 5 quotes from the book, and it can be or from the poem, it can be from anywhere in the poem to justify the choices you made in your image. So here's an example where they've, just done it sort of in different places with little arrows. Here's an example, they used color. And I put them to the side with the little quotes from the play. I'm going to laminate them and I'm going to put them out in the hall for everyone to see. So we'll have a little art show. We're going to spend the rest of class today, which is like 8 minutes on it, and then we'll spend some time next time. Yeah, Sammy? Okay, that's okay. So I think that I think I want you to do this by yourself alone. It doesn't have to be silent in here or anything while you're working on it, but I want to see everyone connecting their artistic interpretations to their poetic interpretation. So let me go get you some paper. Okay, I've got all different colors, so you'll come back and grab whatever color you think is gonna work well for this poem and capture the mood.